Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I'm going to do a little disassembly for you of this big guy. This is the Spyderco Shaman, or Shaman if you want to be boring about it, but I like Shaman. My God, I'm going to mispronounce whatever I see fit. Speaking of which, Marcin Sleesh. Oh, sorry about that, Marcin. So anyways, back at the ranch, this is the Spyderco Shaman, and this is a very interesting knife. This was released at well, it was announced, I think, this mid-year of 2017. It's a very, very cool thing. I got the handle one at Blade Show, and you know, I like very much the idea of the knife, even though I know very clearly that this is not for me. I'm using a T8 driver here, and then I'll use a T10 driver for the pivot. Swap that out. This is absolutely a big, beefy sort of beater knife, and I think they've done a good job of making it so. All you have to really do to take it apart, though, is take out these three screws, this guy, and this guy, and then everything comes apart straightforwardly. And then you have access to the inside of the knife. Now, it's worth noting, by the way, that you could actually disassemble this guy further. You could use a T6 and take out this screw, and this screw, as well as you'd have to take out the clip there, and then take out the pivot as well, and then at that point in time, you would have it fully disassembled. The only real conceivable reason you might want to do this would be to put some kind of a rust protectant on the backside of these scales, particularly if you're in salty conditions on a regular basis. That might be something to consider. As for me right now, I just don't see a need to do that. The knife is in good shape, and that's a bunch more screws with a bunch more wear, and so I don't really see a reason. But it's absolutely something you could pull off. Another thing to note is that this has a pivot that is, if not the same pivot as on the Spyderco PM2 here. I'm just trying to clean a little bit of the thread locker out of there. If not the same pivot, it is a very, very similar pivot to the Spyderco PM2. And what this means is that this back washer here is being held captive by the washer, by the pivot, that is. It's not a problem. You can still lubricate it. It still works just fine, but it is something you're going to want to keep in mind. If you're trying to pull that off of there or shake it loose, you're going to drive yourself a little bit crazy. I'm already a little bit crazy, so I'm not concerned, but it is something you're going to keep in mind. I'm just going to clean this guy off. Got a little bit of 91% rubbing alcohol here. Not so hard to do this one. Nice and straightforward. This is also a nice demonstration of the Spyderco compression lock, which has this little guy which goes up into this little groove, right up on this knife. You can see a couple of nice details, and that you can see they've made some effort to polish the detent ball path here, which makes the knife close a little bit smoother. You can also see that they've added this little tiny divot here is a detent ball ramp, which helps to get the detent back onto the blade as you're closing the knife. Just smooths things out a little bit. Again, these are little things, but they're little things that show that Spyderco is trying. They show that they give a damn. You're always welcome to show me little things that show me you give a damn. I will always appreciate them. And so that's definitely a nice thing to see. Aside from that, looks like 717A. Given that it is currently October of 2017, and this guy came out over the summer, my bet is that that's like a lot number, a batch, something like that. Tells them, you know, when this particular knife was made. And I'll go ahead and clean off this region here. This knife has not been carried. Well, actually, it's not true. I've carried this a couple of days. But this knife hasn't been substantially carried, and I haven't beaten on it or anything, so it's not super dirty. One other thing to highlight is it's got this nice, big, heavy washer in the back here, which is actually probably heavy and big by design. In fact, you can see they have removed only the bare minimum in order to keep this guy in there. In order to have access to the other things around it. That's probably just because they want this washer to add a little bit of weight to counterbalance the handle, because, the blade, that is. Because the blade is nice and big and beefy. All right, what we're going to go ahead and do is put some oil onto this guy. I'm going to use 10-weight nano oil here, and I've got it in a little pen sort of applicator that helps me prevent myself from putting too damn much of it down. So I'm just going to put a couple of dots on one side of the blade here. Do a little bit, actually I'll put a little bit onto the pivot itself, and that way that'll kind of rotate. And then just to kind of distribute it, I'm going to rotate the pivot a little bit unnaturally all the way around. You can also see where it hits the stop pin on the top here. The stop pin also being important for the compression lock, because that's what's the, if this pin weren't there, the compression lock, you just, in order to unlock the knife, you'd push it until this whole spring breaks off, but it's compressed. This little chunk is compressed between the blade and the... Anyways, that's the name of the compression lock and where that comes from. you know, it's always tough for me to know and gauge as a gear reviewer and YouTuber just how much background I need to give on a given piece. You know, I can assume that a lot of the hardcore knife geeks who might be looking at this already know how a compression lock works, but, you know, somebody who's just getting into the hobby might not. And so, you know, yeah, anyways, that was a complete go off on a rant there, but I went off on a rant there. Okay, so now at this point we have all of our washers in place. We have the pivot is in there. The stop pin is just sitting in this top portion here. Can we break it free? We could. I don't need to. It's fine. So we can just go on ahead and put this guy back the rest of the way together. We don't need to put any lubrication on this side because the pivot will be prevented from moving. This washer will be prevented from moving by virtue of being pinched between the pivot screw and the other washer there. So we'll just kind of drop this guy onto here. And when I say just kind of drop, I mean we're going to carefully guide it in such a way that the... I'll disengage the compression lock here to make sure everything goes into place. But I'm guiding it so that the stop pin is seated on both sides and whatnot. It's not just like throw it at it and hope for the best. Although that would be pretty entertaining too. But then I'm going to use a little bit of blue Loctite on this guy. And I'm using a Loctite and a stick, which I find just a little easier to control. But I'm going to go ahead and slide the pivot screw into place here. And just tighten it down. I'm not fully tightening it yet. I just need it to be in a position where it'll stay in place. Now I'm going to go ahead and put in my 2 back handle screws here. A very quick disassembly so far. 6 minutes, 41 seconds. Can't argue with that, right? Could have extended it had I taken apart the back way, but honestly, that's really so seldom something you need to do. Okay, tightening that down. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing on the other side here. And beautiful. Tighten this on down. Okay. Interesting. Right now, there is 0 blade play, which means my pivot is sufficiently tight. The action on it is fine. It'll wear in over time. This will absolutely smooth out as this is used more. But I am going to go ahead and mess with the pivot just a little bit to see if I can smooth the action a little bit further. When the pivot is a little tight, sometimes the blade doesn't want to swing as nicely. And for me, at least, one of the pleasures of the compression lock is that nice free swing in action. So I want to get it to a place where there's 0 blade play to either direction, vertical or horizontal. And then I also want to be able to... have it smoothly go up and down there. Okay. Try this again. Making very small adjustments here. No play. Okay. Good. Let me see if I can smooth that out a little bit further. Okay. These are tiny micro freaking adjustments. Quite. There's a little play there. All right. Let's tighten back up a little bit more. Play is gone. Just make sure this didn't come loose at all. No, that's good to go. That's good. There we go. Beautiful. All righty. So there you go. That's your Spyderco Shaman. How to disassemble and maintain it. Hope this has been interesting to you and that you have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.